Hey, welcome back, guys. So, the USA and China have been at trade wars for a very long time now, and this has gone on for over a decade, or a decade rather. And the USA has accused China of security issues, and China have also accused the USA of bullying and afraid of them being the next world superpower and all that. And there have been lots of accusations here and there, left, right, and center. In 2014, a Chinese company bought the iconic Waldorf Astoria Hotel. As a result of this, the then US President Obama stopped sleeping at the Waldorf Astoria. Now, it had been an age-long tradition that when US presidents visited New York rather, they usually sleep at the Waldorf Astoria. But as soon as it was bought by a Chinese company, Obama stopped sleeping there, and since then, no US president after Obama, Trump had not even gone there before. The thing here is this: you will have to understand the sentiments from the US perspective. In 2016, after the San Bernardino shooting, the US government had to sue Apple to court because Apple refused to unlock an iPhone 5C belonging to one of the shooters, that was Syed Farouk. You know, now that kind of thing can happen in China. In China, the government just comes and says, unlock the phone, and you have to do it. The government just tells you, we want this, and you give them. And the government can easily just say, we want information on so and so and so, provide it for us. You will have to do it. You don't cough. That is how the Chinese system works. So the US is afraid that most Chinese companies are being used by the Chinese government for other purposes, or most Chinese companies are being manipulated by the Chinese government to feed, or by the Chinese Communist Party to feed their own purpose. And the company that has been caught in the crossfire of these trade wars the most is the biggest Chinese tech company called Huawei. Now, Huawei has been having soured relationship with the US for a very long time. And just in case you didn't know, Huawei phones don't sell in the US as a result of the fact that the US government banned Huawei phones. And they also banned most of the telecom networks, not most, all the telecom networks, to stop using Huawei equipment. Huawei is the biggest manufacturer of telecom equipment in the world. Whether you go to Africa and in Europe, in fact, Africa and Europe mostly depend on Huawei equipment for their networks. And then recently, with the acquisition of 5G rolling out, Huawei is one of the companies that have been able to bring in 5G earlier on than most of the US companies. And 5G is becoming a battle right now. And the Americans are being accused that they have not been able to come up with 5G, and they're trying to bully Huawei to come to submission so that some US companies will be able to develop 5G and use them. And President Trump has said that he wants 5G in the USA, but definitely not from Huawei. The battle between the US government and Huawei has been heating up to a point where in 2017, or in 2018 rather, the Huawei CFO Wang Zumeng, who is also the daughter of the Huawei founder, was arrested in Vancouver, Canada, when she was about to connect flights at the request of the US government. Canada is a close ally to the US government, and she was to be extradited to the US for fraud and a lot of other charges. And the Chinese government and Huawei had to step in to secure her release and her return to China. One of the biggest of the accusations is that of espionage. Now, they accuse Huawei of working with the Chinese Communist Party and stealing information from American allies and America itself. Even though America has not been able to produce any evidence to support this claim. In recent times, they have been lobbying their allies, that's the US government has been lobbying their allies to put a blacklist or to ban Huawei too. Now, most of the allies are skeptical, and they even said that in intelligence briefing, the US has not been able to produce any documents to support their claim that Huawei is spying on them, or Huawei has been spying on other countries. One of the only other major accusations is from Britain, that Vodafone said that they found some backdoors in Huawei equipment which could be used for spying, and Huawei greatly denied this. And also, the US government also accused Huawei of um, violating US sanctions in Iran and working with some of the companies there to which are under ban or which are under heavy sanctions from the USA, and money laundering and all those heavy accusations. But the major thing that the major one is that of espionage, which is a fancy word for spying and stealing of information. Now, just in case you have not been up to date with what has happened in the past week, let me just give you a quick reminder or a quick up-to-date information. Now, the Trump administration added Huawei to the U.S. Department of Commerce's entity list via an executive order, thereby blacklisting the company as far as U.S. corporations are concerned. On May 19, Google publicly stated that it will no longer be able to do business with Huawei, and their statement goes, "We are complying with the order and reviewing the implications. For users of our services, Google Play and security protections from Google Play Protect will continue to function on existing Huawei devices. Huawei will only be able to use the public version of Android and will not be able to grant access to proprietary apps and services from Google." Now, what that simply meant was that Google will stop giving updates to Huawei devices. Google will stop supporting Huawei devices. But they said that existing users will still be able to use Huawei devices very much. There will be no issues, but further Huawei devices that will be released, Google will stop supporting them. And then on May 20th, Qualcomm and Intel also joined the queue and said that, hey, we can't do business with Huawei anymore as a result of the executive order. Now, understand something here. These companies were not saying that they will not be able to, they don't want to do business with Huawei anymore. All they were saying was that our hands are tied. The government says that we can't do business with you anymore. And then on May 20th, the Trump administration's Commerce Department issued a temporary license that will allow Huawei to maintain its current product for existing customers. The license expires on August 9, which will essentially bring the full weight of the ban to bear. So after the August 9th, that's when we're going to know when these issues will be resolved. But I think what will happen between that now and that time is that most of these major US companies that benefit so much from Huawei, that is Google and the rest of them, will go to work in the background and do, if they have to lobby or if they have to do anything they have to do to make sure that this ban is lifted. Because take for instance a company like Google can't afford to lose a partner like Huawei. That is going to be devastating for them. And then on the 22nd of May, ARM said that they have stopped doing business with Huawei and they have ordered all their staffs to stop every transaction that was going on with Huawei that is complying with the Trump's executive order. Now, here's the reason why most people believe that these things or all this Huawei saga by the Trump administration, they are politically motivated, or perhaps they are just political gimmicks because Mr. Trump will be seeking re-election next year. Now, Mr. Trump said, I quote him, that if we made a deal, I could imagine Huawei being possibly included in some form or part of it. I mean, that is a funny statement. This is the company that you guys have accused of being a security risk to the USA and its allies, and then you're saying that if we make a deal that will bring them back in, we'll include them in the deal. So are they no longer a security risk? So it's a funny thing, though. It's a funny thing, you know. Now the question is, should we be worried about this ban on Huawei? I think you should, because if the USA bans Huawei from buying parts from US manufacturers, then it's going to be a very big problem. It's going to affect them. It's going to affect me. It's going to affect you. You know, you see how a phone is made is, most companies that you see don't manufacture anything from their phones on their phones. They buy them. They buy parts. Take for instance a company like Apple. Apple relies heavily on another company called Foxconn to produce their iPhones, and they also rely heavily on Samsung to supply them the screens, the LCDs and the OLEDs that they use for their phones. You know, so if the South Korean government bans Apple, that means Apple is going to find it really, really difficult to have screens to put on their phones, because that means their major supplier of screens, which is Samsung, will not be able to supply them screens anymore. So that is what Huawei is going through right now. Huawei builds most of the chips they use in the USA. Qualcomm produces most of the processors for their devices, even though they have their own Kirin processor series, which they run on their own flagship devices. But even the Kirin processors are very, very much dependent on companies like ARM, that is based in the UK, that produces the core of those processors. So banning Huawei means that Huawei might not be able to make these processors anymore to run on their devices, and that might not really be a good thing for them. And also, most of the parts that they get from companies like Qualcomm might not be able to come anymore. And then you talk of, so it's not really a good thing for a good time for those of us that are tech enthusiasts. So Huawei going up the market means most companies like Samsung and Apple, that Huawei is giving them a run for their money, will actually slack back a bit, because there will be one less company to worry about. And with the rate at which Huawei is going, they could overtake Samsung by 2020 to become the largest or the biggest phone manufacturer in the world. And guess what? They have actually done this without selling in the US market. So just imagine if Huawei was allowed to sell devices in the US market. Maybe by now they would have been ahead of Samsung. Google pulling his license from Huawei is going to hurt them, but it doesn't mean they can't make phones anymore. In China, Huawei will be fine, because 50% of their sales come and their revenue comes from China. And in China, Google services don't work in China, because like if you get to China right now, most of their American companies internet services doesn't work there because of internet censorship. Me as a consumer and you as a consumer shouldn't allow this happen. We have to speak our voices out and make sure, at least if they are going to be punished, like in the case of ZTE, that the US government also accused them of espionage. They were punished, and I think they were fined some billions of dollars, which they paid, and they were allowed to continue doing business in the USA. So I think if there are issues like this, Huawei should be punished, maybe with a fine or something, and with a caution, but not a total ban. Even though Huawei has said that they have foreseen this coming a long time ago, so they have been preparing for this day. And they also said that they have been working on their own operating system, which they might call Hongmeng OS. And they said by, say, 2020, most Huawei devices will start running on this new operating system. Well, I actually don't know how possible this is at this stage, because you see, bringing a new operating system all together is not child's play, because you need to bring in developers, you need to have other companies running the same operating system, so that developers will find it worthwhile to develop apps on that operating system. Even though Huawei said that their new operating system might be able to run Google's Android applications, so which means you can download an APK app and install on the new Huawei OS, and it will work. And they also said that developers might not need to change a lot of things. They might just need to tweak the existing application a little bit, and it's going to work on their own OS. But I don't know how they plan to pull this off, because I remember the BlackBerry OS 10, before it went into extinction, we were actually able to install APK apps on it. But the problem is that if you install an APK app on the BlackBerry OS 10, most things didn't work well. Like I remember when Facebook, WhatsApp stopped working on the BlackBerry OS 10, so we downloaded APK apps of the Android version and installed on the OS 10. The problem was that mostly on WhatsApp, you couldn't do video calls and all that, and it kept crashing, and that was the same result we got with most applications. So I don't know how this might be possible. One of the reasons why Windows phones died was because there was no much of app support, number one, and then number two, the people didn't really use Windows phones that much, so developers felt like it was really not worth the while to spend time developing apps for Windows phones. So Windows phones just died a natural death. In fact, Windows OS was one of the reasons why um, Nokia actually went into extinction and then had to come back into the market again, because most people didn't buy Windows phones. Most people didn't develop applications for Windows phones. So Huawei have said that they are going to handle this carefully, because Huawei is wealthy, they have money, so they can lobby developers to develop applications on this their operating system. And I hope this works out, because that is going to bring in more competition into the market. And what are the effects of this whole thing on US companies? Now, the US companies are they're actually at work right now, lobbying and talking to senators in the House to make sure that this ban doesn't stand and everything. Why? Because if this ban stands, then it's going to mean that the US companies will lose billions of dollars. Say a company like Google, for instance, Google cannot afford to lose a partner like Huawei, because losing a partner like Huawei means that it's going to set them back billions of dollars. What about companies like Qualcomm or Intel that produces processor for most Huawei laptops and phones? It might really be a big blow for them too, because these companies export billions of dollars worth of goods to Huawei every year. And another way this will hurt the US companies is the fact that, you see, this ban, the effect of this ban, the US companies won't feel it right now, but they're definitely going to feel it in the future. Why? Because most companies have seen this happening now. Like, they've seen the ban of the Trump administration's ban on Huawei and everything. And what most of them will do is that right now they will go to work. Say for instance, Samsung developed the Tizen OS some time ago. It didn't work out, but right now their smartwatches run on that operating system. And what companies like Samsung and other companies will do is that they have seen it, like, if the American government could do this to Huawei, then we are not an exception. So what most of them will do is they will go to work now and start working on an alternative to Google, and they'll start working on an alternative to Qualcomm, and they will start working on an alternative to companies like ARM and Intel. This will actually come as a blow later on in the future, not today. Because if Huawei eventually brings in the operating system and it works, then most devices, even including Samsung, will start running on that Huawei OS. And this will render companies like Google less powerful. So what the Trump administration is doing right now might not have its effect right now, but later on it's going to have a very devastating effect on US manufacturing and US technologies. Now, how has China responded to all of this? China is the big brother that doesn't talk too much, but you only see him in action. So China has not really said anything major or concrete, but one of the things they have done right now is that they have lifted lifted taxes on US, or they have increased or raised up taxes rather on US goods. And also there's this anti-Apple sentiment or anti-American sentiment going on in China right now. Like, most Chinese are dishing away their iPhones and going to buy Huawei phones. That's in solidarity with Huawei, because they believe that the US government is actually bullying Huawei, which is not supposed to be. And so there's this movement that is going on in China right now of boycott Apple, boycott American products. And also the USA should be very careful, because if China decides to say, okay, let's place a ban on Apple too, it's going to cause a devastating blow on Apple, because Apple can't afford to lose the Chinese market right now, not at this stage, because their sales are going down. They're having issues with trying to keep their sales up. Even though in recent times President Trump has said that Apple should come back to the US and come and start and do their manufacturing in the US. But can you imagine how much an iPhone will cost if it's produced in the US? As of 2017, the factory cost of an iPhone was about $250 if I am not mistaken. So just imagine that same phone. That's when the phone is manufactured in China with cheap labor. Just imagine that same phone now being manufactured in the USA. How much will it cost after it's done? So moving the factory to the US is not an option for Apple right now. And besides, even if they wanted to move their factories, it's not something that can be done in a year or two. It's something that will take years to be done. and that is going to set Apple back with some very heavy billions of dollars. So you see, in this trade issue that is going on right now, there's going to be very serious, devastating blows on both sides. China will lose, and the USA will also lose. Both sides are going to feel the impact of this trade war so much. But the people that are going to feel it the most is you and me. As the saying goes, when two elephants are fighting, it's the grasses that are under that suffers. So I pray they resolve this issue on time before August 19th, when is that the 3-month ultimatum will expire. Else it's going to be an issue, and I pray they don't allow it to get to that. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you're new here, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon. Alright, so you guys let me know down in the comments what you think about these issues. Now we'll continue covering these issues as time goes on. Okay, thank you so much. I'll see you again in the next one.